After my husband died in that horrific train accident, a part of me never came back. He was on his way home early to surprise us with flowers. It was raining that day. I remember because I was folding laundry and humming to a tune he used to play on his guitar. Then the phone rang. The world hasn't sounded right since. My name is Rachel Wells. I'm 35 years old and a mother to an 11-year-old girl with eyes just like her father's. Her name is Emmy, and she's the only reason I breathe. After the funeral, the silence in our apartment became a person. It sat in the corners. It ate at the dinner table with us. It tucked itself between the blankets on my bed. But I fought to keep moving. I worked. I saved. I protected the apartment my husband and I paid for together, one room at a time, one sacrifice at a time. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. I thought the worst was behind me. I thought the pain had reached its limit. But pain, I would learn, has layers. And betrayal cuts deeper when it wears your blood. 2 months after the funeral, my father came to visit. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring food. He brought demands. "Your sister needs the apartment," he said bluntly, barely sitting on the couch. I blinked. What? She and her fiancé just got engaged, and they need a place. You have more than enough. It's only fair. Fair. That word stung, because fairness never existed in our home. Growing up, my sister Lena was the golden child, the praised one, the celebrated one, and I was the leftover. When I did something right, the praise went to her. When she failed, the blame came to me. Still, I stayed quiet, loyal, like a fool. "I'm not giving away the apartment," I said firmly. His jaw clenched. I wasn't asking. "Yes," I said quietly. "You were." His face turned red. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said, standing to match his stare. "I think I finally learned how to say no." That night, he left without another word. I locked the door behind him, but not my fear. Something about his silence felt dangerous, and 2 days later, I found out why. I had stepped out briefly to buy groceries, less than 20 minutes. When I returned, I heard a sound that made my blood go cold. Screaming. My daughter's screaming. I dropped the bags. Ran. The door was ajar. I pushed it open, and what I saw, I will never forget. My father. His hand clamped around Emmy's throat. Her hair twisted in his fist. She was gasping, eyes wide with terror, and all I could do was freeze. Not from weakness, but from shock so deep it paralyzed the soul. My baby, the only piece of my husband I had left, being hurt by him, the man who was supposed to be her grandfather. I stood there, one foot inside the doorway, trembling, broken, until Emmy's eyes met mine, until I heard her whisper, "Mommy," and then something inside me ignited, something ancient, something unstoppable. I lunged, not like a daughter confronting her father, but like a lioness protecting her only cub. I shoved him with everything I had. He stumbled back, releasing Emmy as she fell to the floor, coughing, sobbing. "Get away from her!" I screamed, louder than I'd ever heard my own voice. My hands were shaking, but I pulled her into my arms, checking her neck, her scalp, her face. Red marks. Tears. Terror. But she was breathing. She was alive. I kissed her forehead over and over while whispering, "It's okay. It's okay. I'm here. Mommy's here." My father, for the first time in my life, looked unsure. Not angry. Not smug. Just exposed. "You're overreacting," he said, voice flat. "You assaulted my child," I said. "She was being a brat," he snapped. "I was teaching her a lesson. You're too soft on her, just like you were too weak for this family." I stood up slowly, trembling. I want you out of my home, I said through clenched teeth. I don't want to see you. I don't want you to speak to me. I don't want your name in my doorway again. He stepped forward. You're just like your mother, too emotional, too sensitive. Maybe that's why your husband died. He couldn't take it anymore. I didn't hit him, but the silence that followed might have been louder than a slap. He left, and I locked the door behind him. Emmy clung to me the whole night. She didn't ask questions. She just cried into my shirt while I held her like I was trying to hold the pieces of our world together. And as I stroked her hair, I made a promise. To her, to myself, to my husband, wherever he was. They would never hurt her again. Not with words, not with hands, not with power. That was the night the rage settled into my bones. Cold, steady, strategic. Revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be slow, silent, satisfying. But it wouldn't just be about justice. It would be about protection. I wasn't just going to get back at my father. I was going to destroy the illusion he built, the illusion that he was untouchable, that Lena was innocent, that I was disposable. The next day, I took Emmy to the doctor. Got a full exam, documented every bruise, every tear. The nurse saw the marks and her eyes filled with fury. We'll file a report, she said. You have every right to press charges. I nodded, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Because pressing charges would be just the beginning. I wanted to end the performance completely. You see, my father wasn't just some cruel old man. He was a retired judge, respected, feared, admired. People still called him Your Honor, even in the grocery store. And Lena, the darling daughter of a powerful man, her wedding was being planned for the spring, 200 guests, a vineyard venue, a designer dress, all funded by loans she couldn't afford and money funneled from shady sources. I knew because I'd started digging, and what I found would destroy everything. I didn't just want to ruin their public masks. I wanted them to be remembered by the truth, to lose the respect they held like a weapon, and to learn the pain they thought only I deserved. The more I uncovered, the harder it became to sleep. At night, Emmy would finally drift off after hours of me reading to her, calming her from the nightmares she refused to talk about. And I would stay up, clicking through public records, tax documents, marriage licenses, loan histories. Piece by piece, I built the blueprint for their downfall. I started with Lena. She always lived large, luxury handbags, spa retreats, a fiancé who looked more like an accessory than a partner. Their upcoming wedding was plastered across her social media like a royal event. What no one knew was that she was drowning in debt. The $160,000 apartment my father tried to seize from me wasn't just a gift idea. It was part of their plan to cover the gaping holes in Lena's finances. And those holes, they went deep. I found unpaid credit card bills stacked like dominoes, with final notices tucked behind every fake influencer smile. Even worse, her fiancé had 3 lawsuits filed against him in another state. Fraud, embezzlement, and unpaid contractors. And guess who co-signed 2 of his most recent loans? My father. Judge Alan Michaels, the pillar of discipline and dignity. He used to say, reputation is a legacy. You protect it like your blood. I was going to spill that blood, drop by drop. Quietly, elegantly. One morning, after dropping Emmy at school, I went to see someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. My cousin James. He worked in digital forensics and investigative journalism. We grew up together until my father declared him unworthy for choosing truth over law. James welcomed me in without hesitation. When I told him everything, he didn't blink. He opened his laptop, cracked his knuckles, and said, "Let's do this." Within days, he had access to hard drives, bank transfers, even encrypted email backups from Lena's accounts. We discovered a fake charity fund under my father's name. Donations meant for community scholarships that somehow ended up financing Lena's wedding planner. We found internal memos from the courthouse, times he intervened in sentencing for friends. It wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. And I had the receipts. But I didn't send them to the authorities just yet, because I wanted the last blow to happen publicly. somewhere he couldn't silence or spin the truth. And the perfect place? Lena's wedding. It was to be held at a prestigious vineyard just outside the city, owned by a family friend of my father. They had invited every powerful name on the guest list: judges, journalists, retired politicians, the people my father feared most, those who dealt in reputation. I RSVP'd without hesitation. They didn't want me there, but they couldn't stop me. Not without causing a scene. And trust me, I wanted the scene. 2 nights before the wedding, Emmy came into my room holding a drawing. It was of her and me, standing in front of our apartment. She had written on top in her 11-year-old scrawl, "Home is where Mommy fights for me." My throat closed. I knelt down and held her. "I'm always going to protect you," I whispered. Always. Because this wasn't just about payback. It was about her knowing she was safe, that no one would ever put their hands on her again. The morning of the wedding was warm and cloudless, a cruel contrast to the storm I was carrying in my heart. I wore a simple, elegant navy dress. Nothing flashy, just sharp enough to cut. When I arrived at the vineyard, guests were already mingling with glasses of champagne in hand, laughing beneath draped white silk and floral arches. Lena was glowing, a practiced smile on her lips, her designer gown trailing behind her like a parade of lies. She hadn't looked me in the eye once. But my father? He noticed me the moment I stepped into the garden. His face turned to stone. I gave him a slow, polite smile. He didn't know yet. He would soon. The ceremony was short. Fake vows, forced tears, plastic promises. Then the guests moved to the reception hall, where the real celebration began. I waited until dessert, until the room was full, until the toasts were about to start. And then I stepped forward, calm, composed, heart thundering like a war drum. "Excuse me," I said gently into the microphone near the stage. The DJ lowered the music. Conversation stopped. Every face turned toward me. I could feel my father's eyes drilling into my back. Lena stood frozen beside her new husband, her champagne flute halfway to her lips. I smiled again. "I just wanted to say a few words about family," I began. "About loyalty, about truth, and about what happens when we let cruelty wear a suit and tie." Whispers began to ripple. I pulled out a flash drive from my purse and held it up. "I brought gifts," I said. "Receipts, actually." "Would you like to know how this wedding was funded?" People began shifting in their chairs. "You see, I found that Judge Alan Michaels used a community charity fund to pay for most of it." Gasps. "You know, the one meant to help underprivileged students." The room stilled. I pressed a button on the projector remote. The screen behind the couple lit up. Transaction logs, email confirmations, a list of fund transfers, all under my father's name. I turned the page. And Lena's business? Falsified numbers, tax fraud, multiple unpaid vendors. The next slides showed signed contracts, lawsuits, debt collectors' letters. I could hear the murmurs rising. Some people reached for their phones. Others turned to each other with wide eyes. I glanced at my father. His face was a storm of red and disbelief. "You think I came here to destroy a wedding?" I said softly. "I didn't. I came to take back my name, to take back my voice, and to show my daughter, who's watching this, what it means to never let abuse go unanswered." Then I stepped off the stage. No shouting, no screaming, just the truth. Standing tall in the middle of 1,000 lies. I walked toward the door, past Lena's horror-struck face, past my father's trembling hands, and I didn't stop until I reached the vineyard gate. As I stepped into the sunlight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from James. "It's done. The files have been submitted to the Ethics Board, IRS, and press. Everything's backed up. They can't run." I looked up at the sky. It had shifted. Not a storm cloud in sight, just clarity. The days after the wedding were a blur of headlines, whispers, and broken glass. Not literal glass, though I imagined plenty was shattered behind closed doors. Lena's world fell apart in real time. Sponsors pulled out. Vendors demanded unpaid balances. Her face, once carefully curated on social media, became a symbol of arrogance and fraud. She made one attempt at public defense, blaming the misunderstood transactions and painting me as a bitter widow seeking attention. But the documents I had leaked didn't lie. The truth had teeth, and it bit hard. What I didn't expect was what came next. An invitation. A handwritten envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a note in my father's handwriting. Meet me one last time at the cabin. No tricks, just words. The cabin, the place we spent summers when I was little, before everything soured, before the favoritism, the cruelty, the silence. I didn't owe him anything, but I wanted to look him in the eye, not as the scared daughter he thought I'd always be, but as the woman who ended his reign of fear. So I went. Alone. The forest was quieter than I remembered, less magical, more hollow. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and there he was, sitting in the same chair he always claimed as his throne. He looked smaller, not just older, but reduced. He didn't stand when I entered. He didn't speak at first, just stared into the dying fireplace like it held answers he'd lost long ago. Then he said, "Why couldn't you just stay quiet?" I smiled softly. "Because you stopped deserving my silence." He turned to face me, eyes bloodshot and weary. "You ruined everything." "No," I replied. "You did. I just stopped covering for you." "I gave you life," he snapped, "and tried to take the light out of it every day since," I whispered back. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he said the words I never thought I'd hear. I was wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I didn't let it undo me. Because apology without accountability is just another form of manipulation. "I know," I said, "but I'm not here for your guilt." "Then why are you here?" I paused. "To end this." He stared at me like he didn't understand. But I did. "I forgive you," I said. He looked stunned. "I forgive you," I repeated, "but I will never forget, and I will never let you near my daughter again." I stood. He didn't follow. He just sat there, swallowed by the silence he once weaponized, and I walked out of that cabin without looking back. This time, I knew he was the one watching me leave. It was over. Not just the scandal, not just the punishment, but the weight. The invisible weight I'd carried for years, the ache of not being seen, not being protected, not being loved the way a daughter should have been. I had carried it through childhood, into marriage, and then into widowhood. But now I had put it down, because sometimes peace isn't given to you. You have to take it. It had been 2 months since the wedding, since the cabin, since I told my father goodbye, not with rage, but with truth. He hadn't reached out again. Neither had Lena. I had no interest in the wreckage they were trying to rebuild. That wasn't my story anymore. My story was unfolding right here, with Emmy. Her laughter came easier now. She started sleeping through the night again. She smiled in her school pictures for the first time since her father died. One afternoon, we baked cookies together, her idea. Flour dusted the counters, our cheeks, even the floor. She danced in the kitchen while the oven timer ticked, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel haunted by what had happened. I felt present, alive, whole. Later that week, I got a letter from the Department of Justice. My testimony, combined with the financial records, had led to a formal ethics board investigation into my father's past rulings. It was bigger than I imagined. Lena's fiancé was facing charges, too. But I didn't rejoice. I didn't throw a party. I just sat on the balcony that night with a cup of tea and watched the city breathe. This peace? It wasn't born from revenge. It was born from reclaiming my voice, from refusing to be silent, from saying, I am enough, from choosing to protect what matters, my daughter, my name, my life. Emmy joined me a few minutes later, curling up beside me with a blanket. We sat in quiet, looking at the stars. Mom, she said softly, do you miss Dad? I nodded. Every day. But I think he'd be proud of you. I turned to her. Why's that? Because you didn't let anyone break us, she said. Then after a pause, she added, you're stronger than all of them. Tears pricked my eyes. I kissed the top of her head and whispered, so are you. Because this wasn't just my story. It was hers too. A story of survival, of courage, of rising from ashes not with anger, but with truth, with power, with love. And as I closed my eyes, I finally felt it. That thing I had been chasing all along. Not revenge, not approval. Peace. And I had earned every breath of it. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from your own family? If you've ever had to choose peace over pain or truth over silence, how did you do it? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their strength too.